I think what's interesting when you visit archaeological sites is that you're always trying to think about what they would have looked like back in the day. The story of the Amesbury Archer is quite an incredible one. So the Amesbury Archer is the name given to a burial that was discovered on the outskirts of the village of Amesbury, which is quite close to Stonehenge, the most iconic archaeological site in Britain. And the Amesbury Archer is somebody from the early Bronze Age. So he was buried there 43 centuries ago. And there was a long-standing question about whether it was just a few people coming to Britain in the middle of the 3rd millennium BCE with these new ideas, and the ideas then spread, or whether it was a big influx of people. And that was unanswerable until the era of ancient DNA. So now we have the ability to extract DNA from old bones, and we can see that in Britain there was a big population change, a 90% population replacement in the middle of the 3rd millennium. So that's the kind of information that we're getting now. Really, really profound, important information that we just didn't have before genetics. So these books are about those burial sites, they're about archaeology in the landscape, but they're also about this powerful new science. One of my favourite places to go and walk is the Mendip Hills in Somerset, which we can just about see. Well, this is Dundry, and then the Mendips are just behind that. There's fantastic archaeology all over the Mendips. I mean, we have wonderful Iron Age hill forts, there are Bronze Age barrows up at Priddy, the mysterious Priddy circles. Nobody really knows what they are, and I love a bit of mystery in the landscape too. And then there are whole settlements. So there's a whole Roman settlement up in the Mendips at Charterhouse because of the lead that was there. So the Romans were very interested in the lead in the Mendips, in that mining. So you've got a landscape now which is quite rural, but its past is much more industrial. And I think it's fascinating to go for a walk in the British landscape and to think about how much it's changed over time. The eastern side of Britain and of England in particular is really interesting from the perspective of really deep time. We've got some incredible sites there that take us back to actually the earliest people that ever came to Britain. And these people weren't even modern humans, they weren't Homo sapiens. We're talking about earlier species of human. And on the coast at places like Haysborough in East Anglia, we've got evidence of the types of stone tools that they would have been making, these beautiful hand axes, but also actually footprints as well, going back nearly 1 million years ago. I think what's interesting when you visit archaeological sites is that you're always trying to think about what they would have looked like back in the day. And one of my favourite sites from this current series of Digging for Britain in 2024 was up in Carlisle, where at the cricket club they were excavating ahead of building a new pavilion. They knew they were going to be going down through medieval archaeology, but actually then they started to hit Roman archaeology. Now, we knew the Romans were in Carlisle, but they didn't expect to find any Roman archaeology just there. They found one of the biggest bathhouses we've ever seen in Britain. It was absolutely monumental. It had wonderful stone heads, which probably were up on the roof of the bathhouse. And we think there's a link to the emperor, to Septimius Severus, who we know was in Carlisle just before he went on his campaign up into Caledonia, what is now Scotland. But for me, actually, the things which really brought that site to life were the smallest finds on the site. And they were from the drains under the bathhouse, which were brilliantly well preserved. I actually crawled through one of the drains. And the archaeologists were pulling out all of the sediment from the drains, sieving it all, and in that sediment were these tiny little gems, less than 1 centimetre tall. And they had little carvings of Roman gods and goddesses on them. And they're from rings, they're from signet rings. And suddenly you've got that incredibly personal connection back to individual people, individual Romans in Britain, going back 1600, 1700 years ago. It was those tiny finds which really took me back in time to the people.